and if not, you'll be able to watch it back later anyway, hopefully. So just to start off, just wanted to point out one thing about the upcoming timeline. So we're in week 10 now. You can hear Hashem. Great. Thank you. At least we have one listener. Okay. So, yeah. The part 2 of the project is underway. Hopefully you've all had a chance to try to bring in a third-person character into your game at this point. I know a few people did. Hashem sent me a cool video of his character working in his game. If you haven't done that yet, you really need to do that as soon as possible, which is just to find the character that is going to be your player and bring it into Unity. Or you might need to bring it to Mixamo first to rig it for Unity, and then bring it in and replace the third-person Ethan character, like I've shown you how to do in previous classes. If you're not sure all the steps, just go back over the last couple of classes and you'll see how to do it. It's not that difficult. Just upload your model to Mixamo if you need to, and then you can download that as an FBX and replace the Ethan character in Unity. All right. So the project is going on until the end of the semester. The final deadline is the 12th of January, which is after the break for New Year and everything. Oh, it should be 2021 actually. Yeah. And there's only one deadline before that, which is the beta prototype. So this time you don't need to actually submit the alpha prototype, even though it says here that you should do it, because you really already have your alpha prototype, which is part 1 of the project. So you've got your models and environments, the basic design of each level already done. So at this point you're adding more details, you're adding the character, you're adding the non-player characters, you're adding animation, video, sound, more details in all aspects of the game, and also the interactivity of picking up objects, dropping objects, and today we're going to look at how to use objects in different situations. Some of you already know how to do that, obviously, because I've seen in your part 1 project that some people have already done that, so that's great. And then obviously you need to include the other required elements, which is collecting items like coins, having a score system, and having dialogue with the other characters that we've already talked about. So that's all the things you're working on for the next 3 weeks, basically. So we're coming up to tomorrow's the 1st of December. Hard to believe. And then the next deadline is the 20th of December. So roughly 3 weeks from today, you'll be uploading your beta prototype. And that should be the complete finished version of your game. So all of those things that I mentioned need to be finished for the beta prototype. As you know, hopefully from part 1, at this stage, you need more time after you've done your usability test to make the changes that you're going to receive from the feedback that you get from the playtest. So by uploading this on the 20th of December, then you have time. Well, it's about 3 weeks or so before the final deadline submission. So you have plenty of time to do the usability tests and then make the changes that you need to make for the final submission. Okay, so I think you're all familiar with the process at this point, but I just wanted to point out the 2 dates that are coming up so that you can manage your time appropriately. Make sure that you dedicate enough time every week to be working on this project so that you can get all of these things done in time. Okay. So, yeah, today I wanted to do a continuation of what we were looking at in the last class. So let me just open up the scene that we were working on. just see, where is it? Viking Hall, yeah. So you remember in the last class we had the Viking characters and the Viking helmet, so that you could walk around the scene and pick up the helmet and put it on the character's head. So let's see what we have here. Yeah, I've taken the roof off just so we can see inside a bit better. Okay, let me just check if I can turn on the chat for Twitch. 1 second. There's a few people. Okay, maybe I can... Yeah. Okay, I'll just keep that open. So Hera is there. Yeah. Great. All right. I'll keep that open on that side. And I'll keep that. I'll just check them back every few minutes in case anyone has a comment. All right. So back to Unity. So what we had here, if I just test the game, we had the Viking Hall. We've got our Viking character, and we can run around. Third-person character style. The camera follows the player's movements. And we have a helmet over here that when the player comes close to it, the text comes up, press P to pick up. And when you press P, the helmet goes onto his head like that. And then if you press P again, he'll just drop it wherever he is. So you could also put it into his hand, which we did in the last class. Or you could do other things, like you could put it into an inventory, like attach it to the camera, or you could represent it with an icon that you can collect. So what I wanted to do today is show you how can we use an object once you've picked it up. So an obvious thing would be that we could use the object to open a door. So we've got two doors here in this scene. And I've already done this earlier on this door, so let's see if it works. Yeah. So I've got a trigger box in front of this door that tells the player you must wear the helmet to open the door. All right. So give you a little instruction. If you come close to it, you can't go through. Well, you actually can go through. I need to put a barrier there, but the door doesn't open unless you're wearing the helmet. So let's go back and pick up the helmet. Press P to pick up. And then we go back to the door. And now, if you're wearing the helmet, the door will open and you can walk outside. So I just want to show you how can we do that. There's a few steps involved, but essentially it's very similar to the logic that we've done so far. So let's have a look at the Playmaker for that first. If we go to, let me see, where is it? Cube. Yeah. So I've got the trigger box there in front of that door, and the door itself is inside the scene object, so we can click on that, and I've got a parent object attached to the door so that we can animate it on the hinge, because as you know, if you just animate an object without setting its origin point, it'll animate from the center. So we don't want it to rotate from the center. We won't want it to rotate from the edge where the hinge of the door would be. So we have a parent object there for that. So I created the animation for the door, which has only 2 animations, door open and door idle, which is just like what we did in the animating door tutorial before the break, but even simpler actually, because in this case we don't need to close it again. We just want to open it and then be able to walk through. We don't need to close it. So it's actually easier. And then on the trigger box itself, which is here, let's have a look at the Playmaker so we can see what is going on. So there's actually a new concept that I'm introducing today, which is that you can have more than one FSM on the same object. So you can control like multiple different interactions or different outcomes depending on what happens in the game. So you can have different state machines on the same object. So I've actually got 2 FSMs on this one. And the first one is controlling the door animation. So we have a listener which is waiting for the player to touch the trigger box, and we've got the trigger event in there. And then it only works if the character is wearing the helmet. So you remember we had the collision tag in front of the player, which is like the trigger cube that allows the player to pick up objects. Well, you can put tags on any objects in your game. So I've already put a tag of helmet on the helmet object, which I just created over here in the inspector panel. So I already gave that a tag, and that is being checked in the trigger event. So it will only trigger this animation if the helmet object touches this cube. So, and that will only happen if you're carrying it, obviously. So that's one easy way that you can use an object. And then if that event is triggered, it will go to the second state, which has the animator play action to play the door open animation. And it also has a destroy object, which will get rid of this text, because once the door opens, we don't need to see this clue anymore telling us that we have to wear the helmet to open the door. So we can destroy that object once we have activated that interaction. So the other thing that happens is this text actually. So that's a separate FSM, which is just a simple trigger enter, trigger exit. And if the player walks into the cube, then the message will become visible. And if they leave the cube, it becomes invisible. So that's just an example of how you can use more than one state on one object. So what I'm going to do is take you through this process on the other door, and we'll just use a different object this time, like a key, so that it kind of makes a bit more sense. So let's start off with the door. There it is. And as I was saying, if we were to rotate this as it is, it would just rotate from the center. So the first thing we need to do is give it a parent object. And usually you can just use an empty game object for this. So just click game object, create empty, and then reposition it to the side that you want the door to animate from. You might need to just check different views, make sure that it's not too far in front like it is at the moment. And check it from the side. Make sure it's lined up properly. Okay. There we go. So that's going to be the parent of the door. And the next thing we're going to do is to make the door a child of that parent object. So the parent object is here. The door is up there. And we also have on top of the door is the door details. So I'm going to first make that a child of the door, and then I'm going to make the door itself a child of the game object. And you'll see now in a second that once I do that, the door should animate from the hinge like that. So that's a good tip, and I think I showed you in the previous tutorial for if you're doing a door that is swinging from a hinge as opposed to a sliding door, then that's the way to do it. Just give it an origin point from which to animate from. So now we've got that origin point in place. We want to create the animation. So click on the parent object, then click open the animation tab, which you'll find in window animation. Then click create, and we want to just save this into the assets folder, and I'll call this door 2 idle. And obviously for the idle we don't need to do anything, but then we need to create a second animation which is going to be door 2 open. Okay, you all know how to do this already. So then we can click record and just move forward in time to about 1 second. Open the door like that. And then Unity creates the start and the end keyframe. And if we look inside the assets folder, we should be able to see those two animations we just created, door 2 idle and door 2 open. Okay, so that's the animation part done. Easy. The next thing we want to do is create a trigger box that's going to activate the animation when the player touches it. So we'll just select the cube, go game object, 3D object cube, and put that in front of the door. Make it roughly the same size so that the player doesn't have to go right up to the door for it to open. Okay. There we go. And now we need to create the Playmaker script, which is very simple. Add a state, call it listener, and give it a finish transition. Add a second state, which is called open door. Connect those two together. And then we need a trigger event action. So just type in trigger event. Game object is use owner, on trigger enter, collision tag, send event, finished. I'm going to leave the collision tag empty for the moment because we haven't created the key or the tag yet. But we'll just test to see if it's actually working in terms of logic. So if I just make this a bit bigger so we can see. Test the game. You can see that the first state is activated. And then if we walk... Oh, actually, before we do this, we need to turn this cube into a trigger. So don't forget that very important step. In the box collider, turn that cube into is trigger. And also we can make it invisible, so we don't need to be able to actually see it. So let's check it out now. Walk up to the edge of the room. And just keep an eye on the playmaker there. As soon as the player walks into the cube, it should activate the transition to go to the second state. So that's all we need it to do. We don't need it to have a trigger exit, because once you bring the key to the door and it opens, then you don't need it to close again. But if you did want it to close, obviously you would just have a trigger exit and then play the close animation as well. So to open the door, we need to apply the animator play action on the second state. So just type in animator and then double click. Choose specify game object this time, because we need to tell it to animate the door, not the trigger cube, obviously. So it's this one here. Drag that into the slot, and it already has an animator component and a controller set up for it. Actually, if we just double click on this, we can see the animation. This is the controller for the door. So we've got door to idle, door to open, and it only activates the idle animation unless we call the second animation through a script or a playmaker action. So that's what we're doing now. Back to our cube, and the state name, we need to type in door to open, and make sure that it's exactly the same case. So this is all lowercase, then it should be there as well. All right, let's see if that works. Yeah, so it's working pretty well, but it's on a loop, as we can see. So we need to click on the animation and turn off loop time, and that will make it just play once, and it will stay open then for the rest of the game. Okay, so far so good. Next thing we need to do is to create a key that the player can pick up and then bring to the door, so that it'll be locked by default and it won't open unless you bring the key over to it. So I'm going to go to Sketchfab and see if I can find a key that would be good to use. Let's see. That looks quite nice. So we'll use this one. Download the model. It's an OBJ file. Quite a big image, actually, probably because of the textures. So we'll just download that. And we'll extract the zip folder. Make sure everything's okay. There's another zip in there. And there we have everything we need and the textures. So I'm going to import that into my characters folder. I'll create a new folder. You notice from the last couple of classes, I usually create new folders when I'm importing things, especially if they have a lot of textures, because otherwise your folders are going to get really out of control and disorganized. And sometimes the textures might have the same names, so it's just a good idea to keep your files organized if you can. So go to my downloads folder, source, and I'll just bring in all of these. So there's my key. It's going to make this smaller again. And let's see, that's the helmet. I think I'll put the key up the other side of the room this time, over here. So I'll just drag that into the scene. It's a very big key, obviously. So let's make it a bit smaller. Like that. And just rotate it around so we can see. Okay. We need to apply the textures, so I'm just going to go to select the key object in my assets folder, go to the materials tab and click extract materials. There's only one material slot, so let's click on that and then we'll drag in our image textures. And this is quite a nice model. It's got a normal map and I think we have metallic. So we can, well, actually, I might not use that one. It looks better without it. Yeah. So it looks quite nice with those textures applied. Let me just see if this, yeah, there we go. So we've got a very nice key model there. Let's walk over to it and see what it looks like in the actual game. Yeah, very nice. So I think what I'm going to do, let me just select this key. Okay, zoom out a little bit. I'm going to make this rotate on the spot, so it's sort of spinning around. So let's see, what do we have? That's the object, that's the parent. So I think I'll animate this parent object. And I'm going to add a trigger box around the cube as well, but we don't need to animate that. We can just animate the key itself underneath. So let me just see if I rotate it. Yeah, it should work pretty well. Okay, so again, we just open the animation tab and click create, key rotation or rotate, and start recording. And we're going to go to 1 second. Just, we might make it shorter or longer in a minute, but I'm going to rotate the key until it gets to roughly where it started. So there we go. We're doing a 360 rotation, more or less. And if you want to be exactly precise, you can just type in the values in the inspector. And yeah, so we'll turn off record. Go back here. So just check here. We might have an issue actually. Let me just see. So entry, key rotate. Let me just see if it's working. Oh yeah. So it is working pretty well. It's got some easing going on, which is not ideal, so we can change that. But the rotation is happening. So let's go back to the animation tab for a second. Click on the key and we'll just select all of our keyframes. And if we right click, then we can choose different types of animation. So you've got left tangent, right tangent, both tangents. if we choose linear from that menu, then the animation should play at the same speed all the way around. So it's not speeding up and slowing down like it was by using the default settings. So if you're making something spin around like a coin or a key or whatever, then it's usually a good idea to change the animation type to linear. That's controlling the ease in and ease out of the animation. The other thing we want to do is slow it down a bit because it's kind of spinning quite fast. So I'm going to just double the amount of time that it takes to play the rotation to 2 seconds. So I'm just zooming out and then dragging the second set of keyframes over to 2 seconds. And we can just see what it looks like here. A bit slower. I think I'll go even slower than that. So let's go to 3 seconds. Yeah. Pretty good. All right, so now we want to be able to pick up the key. So first of all, we need a trigger box around it. And as I've mentioned many times before, it's just a better idea to use a cube for this rather than trying to use the shape of the key as a collision boundary. It's just easier and much more simple for the player to be able to interact with a cube. We just need to make sure we put it in the right place, which it isn't at the moment. So you remember our player has a trigger cube in front of him. So that's what we want to do here again, is interact with the key by controlling or by detecting, I should say, the player's trigger cube. So let's put that there. Okay, so we'll zoom in on that. There we go, pretty good. That'll do. So we want to turn on the trigger option in the box collider and turn off the mesh renderer. And then we want to make this cube a parent of the key. So to do that, we need to drag the key onto the cube so that it becomes a child. The good thing about doing it this way is that if we just check the scene, the key is rotating, but the cube is not rotating. So just be aware of that difference as well, because we don't want the trigger box to spin around, because then it would cause like a glitch when we're trying to pick it up. So the trigger box should be static, stationary. But if you want to apply any animation to the object itself, just put that onto the child of the trigger cube. Okay. Now we don't need to go through all the stuff that we did in the last class again, because we already have it done. So if we go to the helmet, we can see all of the states that we had there set up for us. So we can, created an extra transition there by accident. So we can just select everything. I think we can do it this way. I'll just check now and we'll see. The cube. Paste FSM. Yeah. So you can copy the FSM. That way, by just clicking on the states and then selecting everything. Or another way you could do it would be to go into the inspector and just click on here and copy component. So this is the Playmaker script as a component, and you can just copy that and paste it onto another cube. So you don't have to keep redoing all the actions over and over again. You can just copy and paste them and then change the settings. So again, we need some text, which will tell us press P to pick up, but we don't need to redo that either, because the text is attached to the camera. So we can actually use the same text for both objects. So we don't need to change that. But let's have a look. We've got our collision listener, which says use owner on trigger enter collision tag pickup 2. That's the cube that's in front of the player. And then send the event finished. Also make sure that the text is invisible on the listener state. So then if we touch the cube with the trigger box, then we will get to see the text. And if we press P, it's going to pick up it's going to go to the next state. But if we walk away, then it'll just go back to the first state. So the next state then will pick up the key, and it's going to attach it to our character's head at the moment, just like the helmet. So we'll change that in a minute. And then we can drop it again by pressing P again. And the text disappears. And then if you do drop it, it'll just leave the key wherever you're standing at that particular moment, and then go back to the start so that you can pick it up again if you want. So let's see if that works. Keep an eye on the Playmaker script, and we'll just test it out here. So we're on state 1 for the key, and then we'll go over here, and hopefully, yeah, when we walk close to it, the text comes up, press P to pick up, but if we walk away, it goes away again. So that's working okay. But just remember as well that our player's trigger cube is roughly at eye level. So if you have an object on the ground, it wouldn't work unless you lowered the trigger box so that it will actually touch this cube. So let's press P, see what happens. And yeah, it's attached to his head, all right. Very strange. Okay. And then this door won't open because we're not wearing the helmet. This door will open because we didn't apply the collision tag yet. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Oh, yeah, let's see. We can wear the helmet and the key at the same time. Yeah, there we go. Oh no, we dropped the key because we pressed P again. So you can only wear one of them at a time. All right. So just to show you, inside the third-person controller, we have this trigger cube that I was talking about, which is invisible at the moment. But we can just make it visible. So it's actually just a cube right in front of his face, which is used to interact with other objects in the scene. Okay, so what do we need to do next? Well, I think we need to just fix the key so that it doesn't get attached to his head. We want it to go into his hand this time. So let's go to the key. There it is. And we go to pick up object. And for set parent, instead of the Viking's head, we're going to choose his hand this time. So like we did in the last class, we put the helmet in his hand, but so we're going to find his skeleton, the armature, which has been rigged to the character mesh, and we're looking for his hand. So we've got, that's his leg, left leg, right leg, his spine, then his shoulder, his neck. So let's put it in his right hand, right shoulder, right arm, forearm, hand. And if you put it in just here, it'll go into the center of his hand. But if you attach it to one of his fingers, then it'll usually look a bit more like he's actually holding it. So we'll put it into his thumb right at the end and see if that works. So that's the one we're going to apply. Just click on your key again and then drag that bone into the parent slot. So now what's going to happen is the key will go to his hand instead of his head, hopefully, if it's working properly. Press P, and there we go, it's in his hand. But it's also still rotating, and it's also too big. So we need to fix those two things, which is make it smaller and also stop it from rotating. So how can we do that? In Pickup Object, we can change the scale of the key. So if we go to our actions, type in scale, set scale, and there it is at the bottom of our stack. So I think should be okay, but I'm going to put it at the top just to be on the safe side. So we want it to get smaller, then become the child, and then activate the key press. So to make it smaller, we can just turn on these values and reduce the size. So I'd say maybe 0.25. That'll make it a quarter of the size that it normally is. Let's try that and click on every frame. Otherwise it'll just it'll only do it for one frame. So let's try this. So there it's kind of in his hand. It's on his, you can actually see it's on his thumb. So maybe it would be better on one of his fingers because it looks a bit weird on his thumb like that. And maybe it's a bit too small. So let's make it slightly bigger. We'll go 0.35. You can always just play around with these settings and hopefully you'll stumble on the right balance or the right mix as you go along. A lot of it's trial and error. You just sort of figure it out as you go along. So what do we need to... Yeah, I was going to just change this to one of his fingers instead of his thumb. So let's go for index finger. No, middle finger actually. So we'll keep it kind of in the middle. And we'll put it not at the end of the bone, so we'll put it maybe, each one of these is a joint on your finger, so you've got your knuckles represented here, or the character's knuckles I should say. So I think I'll try 3, see if that works. And we'll just drag that down into the slot. So now it'll reposition the key in his hand. And the other thing we want to do is to stop the animation. So if we go animator stop, animator actually we can choose animator play and just choose idle because we have the idle state. So let's go specify game object and we want to choose the key. The state name is we didn't create an idle state actually. Yeah, so I can't do that actually. If I go back to the key, and I'm just going to go create new clip, key idle. And here we don't have any animation. So the default is going to be the rotation, but if we want to call the idle state, we can do that as well. So back to Playmaker. Sorry, just 1 second. Hello. Sorry about that, guys. If anyone is still there, just had a phone call. Apologies. Let me see. We can make it rotate only when the character is near. Yep, you can do that as well. So that would be, you would just make the animation play when the character touches the trigger cube. So it's like the opposite of what I've just done there, where I'm stopping the animation. So I created the idle state for the animation, and now I'm going to activate that, which is key idle. Make sure you spell it properly. There it is there, key idle, key rotate. And yeah, that's okay. If we drop the object, we want it to start spinning again. So there we can put animator play, specify game object, key rotate. All right, let's try it out. So hopefully now when we pick up the key, it will stop rotating. And then when we drop it, oh, yeah, it's not rotating, but you can see it's kind of attached to his hand in a strange way. So we could spend more time on this, like if you wanted to set the rotation value so that it's rotate 90 degrees, you could do that, or you could adjust the position. But I think you get the idea. It's okay for the moment. The movement is happening because the character's hand is moving and the key is just attached to it. So that's okay. We could also rotate it the opposite way around so it looks more like the way you would actually hold a key. But yeah, it's working pretty well. So we press P again, we can drop it, and it starts rotating again. So that's good. So the last step for this, to use the key to open the door, we need to give this cube, the key, a collision tag. Okay, so if we go to the inspector, you can see that it's untagged at the moment. So that means it'll just interact with anything using its default state. So we need to create a new tag there. And you see I've got the helmet tag, I've got the pickup tag, those we've used already. So you can create a new tag by clicking add tag. Then click the little plus icon, give it a name. So this is going to be key. Press enter, it gets added to your list. Then you need to go back and select your object again and choose the tag from the drop down. It doesn't automatically get applied when you create it, so make sure that you don't forget to actually choose the tag from the drop down menu. And then we can go back to our door, which is there, the trigger box in front of the door. Have a look at our Playmaker script here, and we have trigger enter, and under collision tag or collide tag we can choose key. So that means only if the key touches this box will the door open. All right, so let's just see if that works. Go over to our key, press P to pick it up, gets added to his hand. And just keep an eye on the Playmaker over here as well. So now when we touch the door, it activates. But if we don't have the key, then nothing happens. Door doesn't open. So that's how you can use objects. You just detect a collision tag for a key or a coin or a badge or a phone or whatever it might be that you're trying to use in your game. And we'll just add the text to this door as well. Same as this one. So I'm going to duplicate this, move it over here, and I'm going to change the text. You must have the key to open the door. Okay. So what's going to happen now is this text will be there by default. You can see it there in the game. So you could have it like that. But if you want it to only show up when you try to open the door, then we need to have a second state on this trigger cube. So the first state we have here, we can see in our inspector, Playmaker FSM, and that's it there. It's called FSM. That's the one that will open the door if you have the key. And the second state, we can add another FSM to the same object by just clicking on this drop down menu. And now you get a new one. And also in your inspector, you can see you've now got two Playmaker scripts, FSM and FSM2. You can give them different names if you want to help to organize so you can remember what you're actually doing with those scripts. So again, we want to have a listener. Nearly always the first state is some kind of a listener. It's waiting for the player to interact with it. And we also want to have show text. And this time we can just choose a simple trigger enter transition and then a trigger exit to go back. So it just means once the player touches the cube, whatever is in state 2 will be activated. And what we want to do is to show the text, so we're going to use set visibility. And we just specify game object, drag in the text in there, and make it visible in state 2. And if you want, you can make it invisible in state 1 as well. So when you walk away, it'll disappear. So I'm going to copy the action and then paste it into state 1, make it invisible. So now when we walk over to the door, the text is not there until you walk in front of the door. And then it tells you, you must have the key to open the door, walk away, and it disappears again. So what's happening there is this is being activated, FSM2, but if you want, you can switch back to FSM1. You can see that it's not being activated because we have not collected the key yet. So let's go and get that. So hopefully you get the idea there. You can have more than one FSM on any object. And that can be really helpful for for making different kinds of creative interactions just by combining different elements. So there we go. When we have the key, the door opens. All right. One last thing is that that text still shows up even after we've opened the door. So what we can do is just tell Playmaker to get rid of the text once the door opens. So on the open door action or state, we've got the door opening, and I'm going to use destroy object. And then I'm going to drag in the text there. So what happens is, once we get to this state, when you collect the key and open the door, then this text object gets destroyed, removed from the game while you're playing it. Don't be afraid to use destroy object. It just means that while you're playing the game, the object will be removed from the scene. It doesn't mean it'll actually delete it from your project or anything. Okay. So let's just do one last test on this, and then I think we'll be done with this part. Get the key, pick it up. Actually, I just want to do one more thing, which is very important for games, is that you want to give aural feedback to the player. Okay, which means you should hear sounds whenever something happens. So when you pick up an object, or when you use an object, or when something changes in the game, there should be some kind of sound effect to give the player feedback to let them know that something happened. Just like in real life, if you do any kind of action, there's a sound that goes along with it. Pick up something, put something down, there's a sound. So it's just like that in games. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to import a sound effect, if I can find one. Hopefully I have some. MP3. Pop. That might be good. Let me see. Fanfare, yeah, that'd be good. I don't have a lot of sounds here, so let's just bring those two in and see. Obviously, you can just download them from a website, free sound effects or something like that. So what I want to do is, when I pick up the key, play a sound effect. So pick up the object, play a sound effect. So I'm going to go play sound. And the sound is a pop sound. Probably not the best sound for this, but there we go. Let's see if it works. No, not a great sound, actually. Let's try this one. No, not very good sound effects. Okay, close that. Just quickly see if I can get one. Probably should have downloaded these before. That'll do. Let's get this one. I have to log in. Great. Symbol. Okay. Right, they'll do. So import those two sounds. And we'll use this one for picking up the key, and we'll use the other one for opening the door. Play sound. Right, let's try that. Okay. Yep. So just keep that in mind. Give your interactions sound effects so the player gets some feedback. It makes it more fun to play. All right. So I think I've shown you everything I wanted to show you there. I'm going to save that one. What I wanted to do next was just to show you how to change the vehicle. So by using the standard assets vehicle in Unity, and then you can replace that with a different vehicle of whatever type you want. But I just want to show you how to do that. It's similar to what we've done with the third person character, replacing Ethan. Sir, I have an issue increasing the volume of sound effect. Can you show us how to fix that? Yeah, sure. You can't do it in Unity though, because as you can see, the default is maximum volume. You would need to use Audition or Audacity. So if we just open Audition for a second, I'll very quickly show you, because it's useful to know, just in case your sound effect is too low. You want to make it louder. And actually this sound effect is a bit too low, so it'll be helpful to make it louder. Import your file, which in this case is this one, I think. No, the other one. Yeah. Then you can just select everything, go to Effects, Amplify, and you can choose how much you want to make it louder. +6 or +3 or +1 decibel. Obviously, if you just increase it by 1, it'll be a little bit louder. By 3, a bit more. And by 6, it'll be significantly louder. And if that's still not enough, you can just do it again, and it will continue to amplify the current volume. And then you just save as MP3, choose where you want to save it. And then import it back into Unity. And then you can just replace the sound effect with the new one, which is this one. And there you go. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. I'm not sure when you asked that, probably ages ago, but it's okay. Right, just to finish off today, I want to show you, as I said, how to replace the vehicle. So I'm going to make a new scene. And I'm going to add some water from the environment assets. And we'll just reset the position. It's already at 0, 0, that's okay. So there we have the sea, or the ocean. Make it a little bit bigger. There we go. You can change the water settings as well. If you just click on that, go over to your inspector. You can change the speed of the waves if you want, the size of the waves, reflection, refraction, all the different settings there in the water script if you need to. But for now, I think it's okay. We don't need to change it. Then I'm going to import the vehicle. So we'll start off with the car, and I'll show you the aircraft after that as well. So the car is the standard one. Bring that in, and we'll put him to 0, 0, 0. There he is. Not very exciting looking car, but kind of futuristic. And if we test now, he'll just fall through the ground because the water doesn't have any colliders on it. So we need to create a plane so that the car doesn't fall through the ground. Reset the position so it's exactly underneath him. Make it bigger and turn off the mesh renderer so we can't see it, but it's still there. And then we have our car driving around. Now I think I already changed the settings of the car, so I'm just going to check. He's going quite slow there. Top speed 150. That's okay. So that's the default settings for the car. I'm going to use a camera, but just a little tip here, the free look camera doesn't work very well for the oh sorry, I'm in the wrong one there. 2D cameras, prefab. Oh yeah. The free look camera that we use for the character doesn't work very well for the car because we don't want to be using the mouse when we're driving around. So the better one to use for the car or vehicles in general is the multi-purpose camera. So just drag that in, and the good thing is you don't even need to tell it what the target is because it automatically detects the car. If there's any issue, like if you have multiple vehicles in your project, maybe you need to tell it which one then, but as you can see, it tries to detect the player's car from the start. And we also need to remove the default camera so that we're left with the multi-purpose, which will follow the player around then. And you just need to adjust a couple of settings in the camera so that it will follow the player a bit better. So just like we did with the third person, we can see move speed. I'm going to put that up to 5. Turn speed I'm going to put up to 3. And follow velocity I'm going to turn that on. So let's see how that looks. There we go. So the camera is following the car much better now. All right, so that'll do for a start. You can always tweak the settings if you want the camera to be closer or further away or whatever you might want. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the car into a different vehicle. So let's find something suitable. which I think I'm going to try to use a boat because it's my my Viking theme. So let's go for, well, we'll go for a pirate ship this time. Make sure you've got downloadable switched on and try to find something that might work pretty well. So let's see. I'm going to try this one. Looks quite low poly. Hopefully it'll be alright. It's an OBJ file. We'll download it. Low resolution, small file size. Let's extract that. OBJ, only one texture. So those are the kind of models that are easiest to work with because it means that you only have to reapply one texture, if at all. Sometimes it does it automatically. So I'm going to create, go to my characters folder, create a new folder here, and call it Pirate Ship. Open in there, import my assets, and bring in my texture and my OBJ file. Then I'm going to drag that into my scene. And let's see what we have. It's much bigger than it needs to be, so I'm going to just make it smaller. Yeah. I also need to apply my material, so go to the Materials tab in the inspector and click Extract Materials. Click on the material and then you can just drag in your texture. And yeah, that worked pretty well. Okay. So now I need to make the pirate ship a child of the car, just like we did with the character. But first I want to rotate it because it's facing the wrong direction. So let's put it that way. Okay, bring it back a little bit, maybe make him a bit bigger. And we want to make sure that the boat is in the water, so it's not just on top of it. So that would work pretty well, I think. If you want, you can play around with we don't want to stretch it, so let's keep it like that. Yeah, that'll do. So let's make that a child of the car. And now when we're moving around, the boat is also moving with the car. So then we have to go and turn off the visibility of the car components. Takes a little bit longer because we've got the wheels and the body of the car are all separate. So just go in and turn off the mesh renderer for each of those. Although if you're not using a ship, if you're using a different car, then you can keep the wheels and then you don't need to animate the new ones. But for now, I don't need to keep any of the car components, so I'll turn all of those off. And then we're left with just the ship. But also we don't need the sound effects of the car driving. So in the car inspector, we can just turn off the audio script. Okay, let's see how that looks for now. Okay, pretty good, but he's he's skidding and he's going a bit too fast for a boat, I would say. So I'm gonna reduce the speed. So let's see. We can turn off the particles as well. So like there's smoke and stuff like that. If you don't want to be able to see those, you can remove them from the scene. You can turn off the lights. We don't need to see those either. They're already off, I think. Okay. Wheels. Yeah. So I'm gonna just put this the boat a little bit lower and bigger. And to change the speed, we just go into the car controller script, and you can see the speed there in miles per hour. I'll change it to kilometers, and I'm going to change the top speed to 15 kilometers per hour because boats don't really go very fast, do they? So let's see. Okay. And I think most of the boat is in shadow there, so I might just put a light at the back so that we can see what we're looking at. Game object, point light. And we'll put that just behind the boat like that. We'll make the range a bit bigger. And I'll make that a child of the boat. Okay. So one more thing I'd like to do now is just to add our Viking onto the ship. So I'm gonna make it a bit smaller. And where is he? Characters. Viking 1, I think. And just to save a bit of time, what I'm going to do is save this scene. Ship. And I'll open the other one. Viking Hall. Select my character, which is here. There's the Viking. He's already textured and everything. So this is another tip that's useful. If you've set up some objects and you want to use them in a different scene, then you can just drag them into your assets folder. And it will create a prefab of that. So I'm going to go Viking prefab. And drag that in there. Would you like to create a new prefab or a variant? So I think we'll make a new one. And go back to our other one with the boat. Don't save. Drag him in there. And he comes in with all the textures, which is great. I'll just put him up here. He's the captain of the ship. And we want a controller. We need to create a controller for him because I'm going to give him just an idle animation. There we go. Put the controller into the controller slot. Open that up. And if you go to characters, animations, then you can find all the animations that you need. There's crouch, idle, jump. So this is the one I need. Just drag that in there. And let me see. If I test, then the captain has an idle animation on him. Okay, so let's move him up just a little bit. He's kind of falling through the floor. And I will just put a cube underneath him so he doesn't fall. And we'll put both of those as children of the ship. We'll just make that cube invisible. And now, when we drive around, our Viking should be on the ship as well, looking around with an idle animation. Okay, so that's how you could do that. And obviously, you don't have to use a boat. You can just use a Ferrari or a Tesla or whatever you want. Any kind of vehicle that you can download from Sketchfab, and you can replace that. Most vehicles operate like cars. So if it's a bike, a motorbike, a boat, or anything that travels on land, you can just use the car vehicle as your template and then just replace the elements like I did here. But if it's a spaceship or an airplane or something like that, then you're going to need to use the aircraft. So I'm going to quickly just show you that before we finish. We're a bit over time, but if you have to go, that's okay, don't worry. I'll just quickly show you this. So we'll make a plane, which will be just the ground where the aircraft is going to take off from. And I will just add a skybox. Let me see. Where are my skyboxes? Okay, and then go to your vehicles and find the aircraft prefabs. There's two types, one with a propeller and one that's a jet. So I'm just going to look at the jet today. And again, we'll use the multi-purpose camera for this. So just bring in camera prefabs, multi-purpose, and it will automatically match the jet's position. So reset. And we can make this a bit bigger so we have a kind of runway to take off from. So that's quite cool for any flying objects. So I know Ream has a broom, a witch's broom. I'm not sure if anybody else has any flying things like airplanes or stuff like that, but if you do, this one is ideal for that purpose. So let's just import a couple of objects that we can replace that airplane jet with. I'm going to bring in the moon so we can fly around. And I'm going to bring in Earthworm Jim, if he works. GLB, I'm not sure if that'll work in Unity, but we might be able to bring it into Blender first. Let's see. Extract the files. GLB. I don't think Unity knows how to handle that, but we'll see. Assets, characters, new folder, aircraft. Import the files. GLB file doesn't work, but we can bring in the textures. And we need to just create the material for the moon and apply the texture. Let's bring that in to the scene just so we can fly around. That should be a lot bigger, I suppose. So I'm just going to open Blender for the GLB file. Delete the default cube and light and camera. File, import GLB. So Blender can handle pretty much every 3D file type that exists. So very useful if you can't bring it into Unity straight away. Just open it in Blender and then you should be able to save it as an FBX. So there we go. Just check if there's any extra objects that you don't want. Like sometimes they have cameras and lights and things. Not in this case. Everything's fine. So we go File, Export, FBX, Downloads. And we'll just put it in the same folder. Gym. Import that into your folder then. Downloads. There he is. Gym. And we can, it comes in with all the materials as well. But actually, let me just check. Maybe we need to go to UV editing mode. Let's see if any of the textures came in. All right, in this case, actually, the textures, the colors of the object didn't get imported for some reason. And they're not part of the texture folder. So, and they don't have any names either, which is a bit annoying. At least if they had the right colors, we could just reapply them ourselves. But let's just bring them in anyway, and we'll put them into the same place as the aircraft. Make them a bit bigger. So we could actually, I'm just going to extract the materials so that we can maybe see if we just change the color, we can do it that way. So that should be orange. Pink actually. and you could just go through it manually and just reapply the colors that way. I'm not going to do that right now, but at least you get the idea. So now we can make that a child of the aircraft. And again, we just have a look inside to see what parts of this do we not need. So that's the wings and the jet. We don't want to actually turn off the object because there's scripts applied to it. So we have to go through piece by piece and just turn off the mesh renderers. It's a little bit time consuming and fiddly, but it doesn't take that long, you know. For the aircraft there's maybe 10 or 15 different pieces, and for the car there's less. When you think you've got the 4 wheels and the body, and then just the suspension as well. And then we have, what else? The fuselage. Again, we can just get rid of the body. I'm just turning off the mesh renderer for each part of this. So everything else stays the same, but we just can't see the aircraft anymore. But all the scripts will work the same way. So now I think that's everything removed. I can just put this a little bit lower. And we'll test it out. Looks pretty cool actually. If it was in full color, it would be even better. Let's see, where's the moon gone? There it is. We'll come back around from the other side, see if we can see it better. It's in shadow. Alright, well, I think you get the idea. So hopefully you'll be able to easily create your vehicle level now as well. Just find the model that you want to use and import it into Unity and replace either the car or the aircraft, depending on what your vehicle is. Alright, so that's all for today, guys. Thanks for joining the session. Sorry for going a bit over time. Yeah, just if you could send me a screenshot of your third-person character in your game as a work in progress on WhatsApp, and I'll just have a look at those. Okay, thanks guys, enjoy the rest of your day.